Welcome to CalCast, your Create International podcast. God Network News, where we give you a new perspective
on events happening in our world today.
This is GNN.
This is God Network News, episode 215. Welcome, GNN fans, to another episode of God Network News, the podcast that tells you what God's doing around the world. Not what CNN tells you, but what GNN tells you is going on in the world. If you're tired of listening to all of that crisis network news and you want to hear what God's doing, well, give us a listen. Steve Addison is a great podcaster and very passionate about movements of peoples to Christ. And Steve has his own podcast, very successful podcast, with over 226 podcast episodes. And the name of his podcast is On the Road to No Place Left. And we highly recommend that you subscribe to his podcast because he has an overwhelming library of exciting topics related to movements. And if you want to learn more about movements, this is the place to find the information, and he has lots of training and tools and other resources that will really make your investigation of this topic successful. So we really want to thank Steve Addison and his partners there at movements.net/podcast. That's how you can find it, at movements.net/podcast, for all of the resources that he has given us for these next few podcasts. Thank you very much, Steve.
You're learning with the So people what it was going to take. And I imagine learning some lessons about strategy, but also learning some lessons about the battle and how God shapes you for this. But then there came the time where the floodgates opened, doors opened, but you were ready for that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it's God's timing, the Spirit of God moving. Dr. K, at that time, he was in his mid-70s. He's now in his early 80s. And so here's the Spirit of God moving in a patriarch, right? In an older, person who's had all these ideas. And he said several times, we've done discipleship ministry for, 30, 40 years. But in the past 4 or 5 years, we've never seen growth on this scale, right? Like never before. And it's because, we have rallied around, God's fame amongst every people, making disciples, releasing everyone to baptize, and releasing everyone to start churches. That's huge for this culture where it's, top down, and we're seeing stuff happen from the bottom up. But yeah, I praise God. And it's really not, not us, it's really God just moving and just saying, hey, we'll be available. But at the same time, we're going to focus, we're going to drill down, we're going to do quality work in the small field that God has given us. And now he's saying, hey, we want you to see every single people group reach. So there's over 130 different ethnic groups in this country. About 60 or 70 are completely unengaged. But we're working with the Legacy Church, working with other groups, working with our teams on the ground, and we're reproducing, again, entering into the harvest. Some people call it the 4 fields, but we're doing all these things from the top level to the village level with a focus on the remaining groups. And their vision is to see every single people group reach by the year 2030, to see leaders and churches and every single group by 2030. I think it's going to happen before that.
So what are you learning about how God works to impact a nation with movements?
I think it takes definitely, hardship, but people who are willing to be unnamed and unrecognized, especially in our world today. Now we have, top leaders, we have people who speak well, are very charismatic, write well, and it's the same in this culture, in this country, and those in reality are not the fruitful practitioners. I mean, they definitely help, they definitely catalyze, and they definitely, but those individuals who, don't write or don't own any shoes, but they're willing to walk 4 hours in sandals, they're willing to take a motorbike and go 2 hours, and they're willing to be questioned by the police. So I got a call in, I think December, this was 2020 during COVID, from one of my friends. We'll just call him Sumbun. And I'm like, Sumbun, aren't you supposed to be in jail right now? Because he's whispering. He's like, yeah, I'm, Pastor Jonny, I'm calling you from the bathroom, in prison, and he's giving me an update. Now, him and his wife are both in that jail place. There's another pastor, and so these three individuals were, officiating a church revival in one of these unreached villages. There was over 400 people in this. I mean, that's huge for this country. 400 villagers gathering. And so they charged him with not having the correct permission or paperwork. And so him and his wife and this other leader spent a good 5 to 6 months. So he called me and he was just giving me an update on how he's sharing the gospel. And I tried to encourage him. And he was also asking for help because he wasn't getting help from the legacy churches. They're slow. You know how they are. They're super slow in getting anything done. But we still love them. And so he was finally released after we did send some help, prayed for him. And again, he continues to send me pictures, and he's still baptizing.
You're listening to God Network News Podcast with your host, Cal Curtis. Look up our website at godnetworknews.com.
Even though he's on parole and they're watching him, he still needs to pay this fine, which is super bogus. It's very not fair. But him and his wife continue to labor, and they continue to love others, continue to go out. And so it's people like that, people like that inspire me. Say, hey, it doesn't matter, Tony. You're like, oh, sorry. It doesn't matter, Jonny. You don't need to compare yourself. You don't need to do this or do that, but just be faithful and obedient to what God has given you and within your sphere of influence. So that's what I've been learning.
And Jonny, how is God shaping you throughout this journey?
I think I've been learning, especially my wife and I. We've been for the large part a part of a very small team. There was times where we were the only English-speaking family, like in the entire province. And I've been learning that, I need to be intentional, number one, about connecting with other leaders. And so throughout that time, I was able to kind of just do this master's degree through Fuller. And I was able to kind of continue learning, but also just different cohorts. I really enjoyed the idea of cohorts. And so learning from people like Kumar and learning from other practitioners. Of course, I've been, mentored by people, like good people, over the years, but learning from other practitioners in other countries, whether it's doing cross pollination type trainings with different field practitioners, for example, in Cambodia or in Vietnam or in Thailand or in Myanmar. So you kind of mix them together. It takes a lot longer with all the translation, but there's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of love and prayer for one another. So just learning together, and so I've been so for me, I've still been growing as a leader, but it's only because I've been intentional to kind of seek that out. Otherwise, there's really no one around. So just being intentional about growing, and then also just being intentional about just taking care of family, and loving on my wife and my kids, and being okay with taking more than 3 days of vacation. So those are, I think, important habits that a leader needs to develop, and that I've been still learning how to rest well.
Jonny, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
So what gets me out of bed in the morning is just this vision that I've had. And I mean, it's really God's vision. It's kind of the same as that dream that I had one time. I was in a village. I'm not a very signs and wonders type person, but I've seen it. I've experienced it. And but many years ago, I saw this picture of as I was sleeping in this village, and there were idols all around in this house. And it was an unreached people group village, but I saw a vision of these believers going to all these other villages, and I think about that, and I also think about my key friends and partners on the ground in the country. I call him Noi. Noi is a very common name, and Noi has been with me and my family, him and his family. We've been together from the start, going on 10 years now. And I always think back to Noi's story. And Noi says, I was in prayer during my college days, and I saw this vision. I saw this vision of me going from house to house, and from these villages, they were going to other villages, and so that was his. And then he was introduced to Jonny, and then he was introduced to movements and to these disciple making principles. But I think about that, I was like, God has implanted the vision already. Like the harvest is plentiful, right? Like the vision is already there. The resources are already in the harvest. The people that God wants us to meet, to catalyze movements and to see reproducing churches. It's all there. So Jonny, it's all there. Like you don't have to worry. You don't have to strive. As long as you be obedient and faithful, it's all there. I'm going to do my work, And as you get up in the morning, this is the vision that I've given you. This is the vision that I've given Noi. This is the vision I've given Tong Sin. And this is the vision in my word, like I've given all people. So that gets me up in the morning.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider donating to help us continue to bring exciting stories fresh from the field. Visit our website at godnetworknews.com and select the PayPal link on the right side of the page, or consider becoming a Patreon partner to receive access to more valuable materials exclusive to our members.